Judy Deutsch, greetings and welcome to Tuesdays with Mike. How are you?
I'm very well. It's nice to be here, Mike.
Good. It's lovely to have you. And as I mentioned to you before we started recording, what I wanted to do to start, if you don't mind, is to take just a moment down memory lane to reflect as to when we might have first met. I don't do a great job of assigning exact years to things. You might do a better job than I, but in my recollection, it should have been something in the neighborhood of about 1996 CSM, Atlanta or so, and then more contact from there as I got more involved with the then referred to neurology section, now Academy. Your thoughts, recollections, anything there?
So I remember that you submitted a paper to the then neurology report. Um, and it was your first experience as an author. And we were also a very young journal. And so there was a lot of interaction between the editorial board and authors. And we did a lot of, I don't want to say coaching, but there was a lot of developmental feedback for it, so
Yeah,
and that was the first time that I became aware of you, and so
yeah.
it's been fun to see the arc of that particular journey because I know that you've been very active in publishing in the last few
Yeah,
years,
yeah.
following your DPT. So I
Oh,
can say
yes.
I knew you when.
Oh, wow. And I'll tell you, there was a lot of redlining on that paper. And Judy, I will tell you, uh, I still need a decent amount of coaching in my writing, and I'm fine with saying that.
Yeah, but I think actually everybody benefits from coaching and writing. Um, and the truth is that certainly you're a person who has such a strong work ethic and perseverance and discipline that I really was very tickled to see when a lot of you have always had a lot of ideas, and thought about things in a particular way and tried to share that and has done that very effectively through teaching. And so I was just very happy that you had also found that pathway through publication. So
Yeah,
congratulations.
thank you. I am admittedly a very casual writer, and when I try to become more professional, I get way too wordy.
Mm.
So that's just, I know myself then. Yeah. But okay, great. So, really, I didn't want to talk too much about myself. I brought you on today because you have a fascinating collection of sectors of things you have done, things that you continue to do. Very interesting, in a positive way, nuanced passions. And I wanted to start with something that you called us to action with regarding international collaborations. And I know you're heavily involved in the International, Physical Therapy Association, physiotherapy. So I want to just give you space to talk about both of those collaborations, and I believe it's INPT as well. Is that right?
INPA, yeah, the International
INPA.
Neuro
Thank
Group.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you're right. I mean, I have always been focused outward and been very interested in global collaboration.
Mhm.
And it's in my areas of scholarship as well as in service.
Mhm.
And I can talk a little bit about both if you'd like. Um,
Please take
I
as much time as you prefer.
Well, from a scholarship perspective, I from the very beginning as a new faculty, I joined international organizations, and at the time it
Mhm.
was the Human Brain Mapping Organization because I was doing a lot of fMRI work,
Mhm.
um, and I just like really liked the idea that we could be attending conferences in different parts of the world and interacting with colleagues around the world. And um, that extended to the International Organization for PTs, which is the World Physiotherapy Association. And I remember going to the first meeting Um, the first meeting was in Washington, so it doesn't really count because it was local to us. But the first international meeting I went to um, that was out of North America was in Barcelona.
Mm.
And it was a great adventure because I found some other PTs from the US that were going, and we were going to share a flat. And so I didn't know these people, and I met them at the airport, and we got to our flat, and I won't go into the details, but we had quite a few adventures where I used my Spanish to get us into places where we didn't have reservations, and we had a great time, right?
Yeah.
So there's just the element of connecting with people, of course. But then at the meeting, um, I met Ruthie Dickstein, and she's a physiotherapist in Israel. And she asked me, because I was presenting a poster, she asked me if I was interested in co supervising a PhD student with her. And I was
Mm.
like,
Yeah.
yes, of course.
Wow.
And it was the beginning of this really fruitful collaboration of us working together to study motor imagery in stroke rehab and doing some projects both in Israel and in the States, um, to build on this shared interest. And certainly she was senior to me, and I had so much to learn from her. And the fact that she invited me was just huge. And it turned into over the years having Israeli students in my lab.
Mhm.
So Anat Mirelman was working with me, and Imbal Meidan, and then postdocs. And these are all people who now have their own labs or doing
Yeah.
really cool work. And that all came from going to this one meeting, right? So
Wow. Yeah.
you can imagine that I got hooked. So I really kind of got there through scholarship,
Yeah.
but then I discovered that within World Physiotherapy there were all these working groups. And at the time I was the editor of JMPT, and they had a group for International Society for Physical Therapy Journal editors. So I was like, great,
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
joining. And, and again, it was like joining. There were lots of journals. I remember meeting people who were heading the physiotherapy journal in Australia, which is a fine, fine journal,
Hmm.
and just learning from each other, right? And so
Yeah.
that was sort of my beginning of getting engaged with it. And then, of course, we're like, where's the neuro group? There wasn't a neuro group. And so I recall Sue Whitney and
Mm.
I and Mindy Levin from Canada and
Mhm.
others were in Vancouver at a World Physiotherapy meeting and at a bar talking about we have to start a neuro group. Let's
Yeah.
start a neuro group. And that was sort of the beginning of that. And there were people from the Netherlands and Canada and a variety of people who were really motivated to do the work to do it. And somehow I just always stayed involved with the group. And then over time, I assumed more leadership roles. And then most recently, I was the president. So it was very organic. Like
Yeah.
we found our people, right? So
Yes.
I think that um, the story may be about international collaboration, but in the end, it's about finding your people, connecting with your
Mm.
people, trying to build something together that could be meaningful and useful. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And the
Uh,
micro stories in there in terms of we took an adventure, we didn't know we were going, we decided to start something, we didn't know what would become of it. That really embodies, it seems to me, that embodies you. You are a very adventurous person, and that I think really stimulates your innovation in the lab. Then too, I've always appreciated your ability to bring people in and connect people also. I think those are just remarkable.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And I find them very sustaining because
Hmm.
I feel like it's fun to learn about other cultures, other people,
Hmm.
certainly about their food.
Yeah.
And so I continue to collaborate. I have a project right now with colleagues in Spain and in Portugal, and I was
Hmm.
just in Portugal, and we were trying to do this work around a consensus challenge that we have in our field of VR and gaming, and
Hmm.
and it's just fun to know them. I went to their house, I had dinner with them, I got to see their kids. I'm certainly much more interested in the dimensionality of my collaborators
Yeah.
than just in that simple
Yeah.
interaction around, the transaction of the science. I love to have it contextualized within the people and their culture, and
Yeah.
it's great. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's fabulous.
sign
And
me up.
I think it brings us nicely to a next topic that I had positioned for us a little bit. You just started to refer to a project utilizing virtual reality. Um, we'll get to more about technology in physical and physiotherapy in a moment. But if you would take a moment for our listeners to clarify exactly how games can be used in therapy but still be skilled therapy, and also on the term gamification, if you will, because I think some people might believe that it has to actually be a game to be gamified, whereas other people, and I think a greater consensus, at least how I use the word and open to changing how I use it, is that if you're competing against points and streaks and levels you might achieve and rewards, that nearly anything can be made game-like if it has a degree of objectivity that can be reproduced. Talk to us about those matters, if you would.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. The project that I was referring to is about definitions,
Oh,
because there
nice.
is a lot of confusion about
Mm-hmm.
definitions in the field of digital health and the kinds
Mm-hmm.
of tools that people are using and how they're using them and the contents of them. And so some of that relates to your specific question around
Okay.
gamification, which is just an element that can be brought into a digital therapy, but is not exclusive to a digital therapy. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, so there's confusion around the terminology that we use in that context.
Mm-hmm.
I think that and maybe why it gets somehow aligned with virtual reality is that when we in physiotherapy started to use things that were video games,
Right.
they were clearly, they have the word game in them, and so I think that sort of magnified people's focus on that. But certainly we've used play in pediatrics for forever, and it
Yeah.
had nothing necessarily to do with a technology um, enhanced.
Right.
So a game has some rules, and it has some ways of whatever, gaining points, or like you said, you can level up depending on the mechanics of the game. But games have a mechanic, right? And they have a goal and they have
Yeah.
some rules. And as long as you're engaging in all of that, you can use the game therapeutically to promote movement, right? Or promote engagement of movement and thinking at the same time, because that's really
Mm.
the beauty
Yeah.
of it, right? Is that you're thinking as well as maybe physically doing something.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I agree. And I do think, though, that video games, in fact, are using very well designed game mechanics. And we did a game analysis very early on when the Wii became something that people were interested in exploring for PT. We did a game analysis very specifically to understand like what's in it when we
Mm.
use more of a motor learning or a therapeutic lens. And yeah, there was a lot of knowledge of results and knowledge of performance, and but a lot of the knowledge of results is what you see in games. It's
Yeah.
information on how you achieve the outcome of the game. And there
Yeah.
were also some quote unquote rewards built in because you're receiving feedback.
Right.
Some of it was motivating, some of it was positive, some was very specific to the outcome of the game. So it has a lot of that stuff in there, but
Yeah.
we build those things anyway when we gamify whatever therapeutic activity we're choosing
Yeah.
to engage with our clients that may be of interest to them, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
the idea is that it's somehow going to engage, motivate, do the things that something that you can quote unquote get into will promote for you. So,
Yeah. That's exceptional. Thank you for taking the time to clarify those. You're doing so with such a degree of humility. It's amazing because you have been a pioneer in my mind regarding the infusion of, incorporation of, and development of technology and rehabilitation. And you did not take one of many opportunities you had there to drop any one of those things of what you've contributed to the field. So let's push the humility aside and encourage you just a little bit more. Before I ask a sideline question that I hadn't expected to because you brought this up, it appears to me as though there's some confusion about dual task versus think and move as well. A few moments ago, you talked about the fact that in a lot of games, we have to think, we have to make decisions. There has to be some rapidity to that while we may also be moving. But it's not always the case in my mind that it's dual task, though, because they're complementary. They're headed toward the same uniform singularity
Yeah.
goal, if you will, right? So there is a think and move, but it doesn't always mean that that's dual task because you're thinking and moving. Am I
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, well, is it cognitive motor, because that's what you're doing, or is it dual task because you're deliberately looking to compete and divide somebody's attention, right?
Right.
So, yeah, yeah. But, you know, it is confusing, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
have those conversations. I remember talking to one of my MD, PhD students and explaining the concept of dual tasking and cognitive motor interference. And like, so what is it that we're doing in this simulation? It's not always so clear. So
Yeah.
I can appreciate why
Yeah.
sometimes those things get mushy together. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, certainly no shame intended if they're confused. And we don't always get everything right. And we also change our definitions about things over a period of time as well. Let's lean in a little bit more regarding technology in rehabilitation and take it any direction you like. Please uh, don't be shy about telling us what you've done and what you're currently doing. But whether you want to talk about using technology for prodromal assessments, for diagnostics, or for greater patient engagement and treatment, take it in any direction that you prefer.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, I very much was just minding my business. Um, excuse me, when my chair, Alma Marion, said, you know, there's this engineering group and they're interested in doing something with the lower extremity, and I was thinking maybe you would want to take a look at it, and I said, you know, sure, I'll take a look at it. And at the time, um, a lot of different groups near me were sort of beginning to explore using some of these technologies for rehab. And what happened in New Jersey is that the New Jersey Commission of Science and Technology said, I want all three of your universities to work together. I don't
Mhm.
want to fund each of you separately. So they effectively brought together people with different backgrounds, engineering, neuroscience, physiotherapy. So was really a very smart decision because they created a group of people that were working on different, at the time, haptics was really big. So
Mhm.
devices that gave you sensory input when you interfaced with a virtual
Mhm.
environment. So
Yeah.
we were fortunate to work as part of this larger group. And I had the opportunity to collaborate with one of the engineering faculty at Rutgers. Um, and they wanted to do something for the lower extremity, and they had gone in and looked at how the rehab was being done on the lower extremity, and they wanted to
Mhm.
do something with the knee. They wanted to
Okay.
like have a device somehow that got instrumented and interfaced with virtual reality for the knee. And
Mhm.
I was like, no, no, you cannot do that because the knee is
It's not
just
by itself.
bending and straightening. There's nothing. Well, I shouldn't say that. But they wanted to do it in sitting. I thought there's just this makes no sense. So I was like, perhaps we should bring it to the ankle. You should think about using like the distal effector
Mhm.
more than an intermediary joint. And so, believe it or not, they said okay. And then we just started out working on this collaboration which resulted in the Rutgers ankle. And that was what was really fun about that is that obviously I didn't have the mechatronics or the electrical engineering skills, but I did have the clinical reasoning and the physiotherapy skills. And so um, I really focused a lot on the software side, which I consider to be the brains
Yeah.
of the system, and my colleagues focused on the hardware side. And my goal was really just to try to bring the physiotherapist clinical reasoning into the software. So can we give
Mhm.
the physiotherapist a lot of choice because we know we like to make the movement faster, make the range
Mhm.
greater, make
Mhm.
the pattern different. So could we embed all of those choices for a clinician,
Right.
right? And so that was the beginning of being, developing these what we call custom systems for virtual reality. And that particular project, from inception to the time we did an RCT, took 9 years because it
Mhm.
was early days and we didn't do a lot of things right. Like we didn't co-develop it with people with stroke necessarily. Like
Mm.
I learned a lot of things in
Sure.
the process. Um, but I think that it was uh, it was clearly a place where we belonged as physical
Mhm.
therapists. We had
Mhm.
very important contributions to make. Um, and I think we shaped that technology in an important way.
Yeah.
And then there was parallel work being done for the folks, some of my colleagues at Rutgers, working on the upper limb and rehabbing the upper limb. And our focus at the time was primarily for people with stroke.
Mhm.
And so um, what happened is that as we're like deep in doing this stuff is when the video games came out. And
Okay.
so it was like, okay, how do I reconcile like this haptic device, which was the
Mhm.
Wii, because it
Mhm.
vibrated and it gave you feedback with
Yeah.
these other things that I have that are in the lab but don't live in the real
Mm.
world. And so that's partly
Mhm.
why I became interested in understanding things that were in the real world. So these video games, at the time it was the
Yeah.
Wii. Um, and so and I don't know, you may have heard me tell this story, but a lot of why I do anything with the Wii has to do with my son. Have you heard me tell this story?
Yeah.
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 But
So
please share. I'm not the only one listening right now.
yeah, I mean, it just so happened that we had a, 9-year-old son at the time. He was interested in having the Wii. He had saved some money. It was very difficult to get the machines at the time. And, I got a tip. I got there. I was able to buy one for him. But because the store was empty, I decided I would buy another one for the lab. And that really was the beginning of exploring it for the lab. And the very
Yeah.
first thing that we did is that we had an opportunity to go into a school and explore what would it be like if we brought this into a school for
Yeah.
somebody who seemed to be a good candidate. So
Yeah.
it was, these things sometimes are serendipity.
Right.
Um, and my son continued to figure prominently because he participated in the study. He came one day and he interacted with the client, but
Yeah.
also at the time, New Jersey APTA asked me to give courses, and my son would come as my TA because honestly, he was much better with the technology than I was, and
Yeah.
he he had a little suit. And he would come and he would sit in the back and he would heckle me when I was talking. He was a riot. And then
Yeah.
he would go and he'd have lunch with everybody. And I was like, Daniel. So anyway,
Yeah.
so thank you to
Yeah.
Daniel.
Yeah.
We really
Who's now an
started.
investment banker, right? Is that right?
He's no, he does analytics for United Airlines. He does
Okay.
that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, he does coding and yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just again, I think part of my driver in what I've always been interested in my research is how does this help practice, right?
Mhm.
And that's really why I got a PhD in the first place. That's why I studied motor imagery. It seemed like something that we could do
Yeah.
that was accessible. And so that's why I was interested in the games because I was like,
Yeah.
games may be more accessible than some of this VR stuff. Now, obviously, the VR has become quite commonplace,
Hmm.
and you can buy yourself these headsets that are highly sophisticated and work quite well for not a lot of money. And you can still like figure out what comes off the shelf and use it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So a lot has happened since those early days. And I'm just so happy that PTs are really in it. They're in it as developers, they're in it as people who are owning companies who are,
Right.
it's just great. It's just great
Yeah.
to see that.
Yeah. Now, I have to tell you, I appreciate your response and I'm informed by it. And this is going to be valuable information for our listeners and audience. But I have to hold you accountable for one thing because I can only allow you to flame serendipity so many times. And you've already done it three separate times without using the term. Oh, I was just in the right place at the right time when the university brought these people together. Oh, I just happened to buy a second Wii and decided to take it into a school. I just happened to be in a bar and we were talking about we need a neurology. And I just happened to go to this meeting and met these people and they invited me to co mentor. So that's actually four separate occasions. We do know that serendipity happens, but people that put themselves out there and are connectors and are intuitive, engaging, and someone that people like to be around. Serendipity seems to happen more frequently to those people, and I may ascribe that to you as well.
Well, maybe it's funny that you say that, but I think it's all about you're going out there, right?
Yes,
You're available and you're
you
open
have to
because
put
to be
yourself
honest
out
with
there
you,
for things to happen. Yeah,
that's how I ended up getting involved with the Cochrane Review. I was at a VR meeting in Israel, and the people who were doing the Cochrane invited me to be a content expert. I was like, great,
yeah,
I'd love to do
yeah,
that. That would be so fun, you know?
yeah,
Um, so I think that is truly though part of it, Mike, just
yeah, yeah.
being open and interested, you know?
Right. And we could go back to Wayne Gretzky that you miss every shot you don't take. And if you're not putting yourself out there, you won't score a goal. But yes, so your qualifications, capacities, endearing spirit complements the frequency that you're putting yourself out there, though, as well. Now, Judy, I've got two other big topics for us to talk about. And I think dynamically, it's just natural that I flip the order of these a little bit because I want to talk with you. It's something that seems an appropriate sequitur for what we've been speaking of, and that is your future interests in field of study or maybe things that you're not particularly going to even study yourself. What are you curious about? What are you looking forward to having answered in the field of physical and physiotherapy and neuroscience that you'd like to share with us? Obviously, things that you can't, you won't, but what's on your mind?
Yeah, well, it's a lot. It's not restricted to even what you just talked about,
Yeah,
but I okay, there some of these things are gonna really maybe surprise you. Um
rapid fire us. Go ahead.
but something this actually relates to professional engagement, but something that I've been curious about, and I've chatted with Randy Romney about this,
Hmm.
who was a PhD student of mine and now is the director of practice at the Academy of
Yeah.
NeuroPT, is just um, like there's so much volunteerism and service around the academy. There's so many people devoting so much time, and I'm just so curious if we could figure out how to study that. Like,
Oh.
what's the benefit to the organization, to the individual, to society when you have
Hmm.
this kind of volunteerism? Are there best practices for it? How do you reward people? You know, we
Hmm.
just we have a culture of just being very, I think, volunteer focused in our academy in neuro. There's a lot of people devote a lot of their time, and
Yeah.
like what drives them, and then how do you make that efficient so that it can work? So
Yeah.
it's not a very well formulated thing, but I've been curious about that. It really is around scholarship of service.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of interested in that in other realms as well. I'm involved at work in the strategic plan at work has a well-being component, and I'm very interested in well-being. I think you know that
Mm.
a long time ago, Ellen Anderson and I wrote a book on complementary therapies, and
Hmm.
I have an active yoga practice. I mean, I'm and a meditation practice and things
Mm.
around well-being, that those are more around personal well-being. But then there are all these models for workplace well-being, and it's it's a world that we live in that needs it. And a lot of people could access it through work as opposed to through their personal things. So I
Hmm.
am quite curious about, can we create well-being at work? Can we build a culture of well-being?
Mm.
And are there things that we can do um, to enhance well-being in through the workplace? So
Right.
that's something I'm quite interested in. I was at a conference in India um, in October, and I had an opportunity to speak about that.
Mm.
And it's just something that I'm really quite keen to learn more about and figure out how to do. Um,
Mm.
Now
Beautiful.
the conference was held at a uh, in a community where they practice heartfulness meditation, and
Okay.
that's a meditation that I think has some really interesting neuroscience questions to ask.
Okay.
And so linking heart and brain. So looking
Hmm.
at heart rate variability and
Sure.
possibly looking at imaging. So I'm kind of curious to figure out some of the mechanistic questions around some of these energy-based
Mm.
therapies because they're
Hmm.
harder to measure. I've always been kind of curious about that. And
Yeah.
I studied motor imagery, and I've done some work in imaging, and maybe I can come back to some of those
Hmm.
things
Hmm.
and maybe look at some of the physiological mechanisms underlying some of these
Hmm.
meditation practices. Heartfulness in particular, other things have been studied a lot more.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious about that, and I think that that would
Hmm.
be fun to do. Now, in my work in VR, um, we're wrapping up some work that was done with persons with Parkinson's and cycling,
Okay.
and I think the thing that I'm is still not entirely clear. It has to do to some extent with active ingredients and the neural
Hmm.
mechanisms that are driving some of the specific
Hmm.
things that we're seeing in VR. And now with the eye tracking technology, we're able to capture and maybe quantify some things around attention. I just was at a really interesting PhD defense from one of our students, not my student. I mean, I was just on the committee, and just the the sophistication with which these
Hmm.
tools are allowing us to maybe have more insight into
Wow.
why this works, I think is of interest to me. So kind of a little bit in somewhat different directions.
Yeah.
Uh,
Not to tease that out more than you can, but it sounds to me like maybe you'll be able to ascribe some. We all know that the eyes you can't say are non-motor, but according to the features that we think about as motor in Parkinson's disease and Parkinsonisms, maybe if you're seeing some things there, you might be able to ascribe even more non-motor signs that are common in some phenotypes of persons with Parkinson's disease. I don't know. Is that at all plausible there?
Maybe, but I don't know that I certainly not, that's not
Yeah.
on my tick list, that
Yeah.
level of specificity around that particular
Hmm.
behavior.
Hmm.
But I mean, gosh, there's so much we don't know. There's a million questions that,
Yeah.
um, you could certainly begin to ask and
Yeah.
try to sort out. But I think that the evolution of the VR technology um, is going to allow us to do some studies that give us a better understanding of perhaps why sometimes we see
Right.
the efficacy um, parsed out in a little bit more carefully. And so if we
Yeah.
could coordinate doing some EEG collection with the eye tracking, as
Hmm.
well as some of the motor behaviors and the physiological responses, I think we could get a much clearer picture.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm going to ask you another question that I didn't expect to, just based on what I'm hearing from you and listening to you. Just a quick one. Uh, do you feel that you have strong opinions about uh, truly immersive versus semi-immersive? Talk to me about that.
um,
And you feel free to define those too if you like
yeah,
for
yeah.
the
I mean,
audience.
that's a
I
term
see
that's
most of your gestures talking about immersive VR based on how you're communicating.
Yeah, well, I was talking about it specifically because the eye tracking is built into the head-mounted display. You can also do eye tracking when you don't use a head-mounted display.
Sure.
So
That's sure.
immersion has to do with whatever technology you're using to get into the virtual environment.
Yeah,
So things that completely occlude the real world are
exactly.
fully immersive, and
Yeah,
things that don't have less degree of immersion.
right.
And so that doesn't necessarily correlate with presence, how much you feel you're in the environment. So the
Hmm.
example people give, a phone is is non-immersive. It's a
Sure.
2D small screen, but you
Yep.
can be highly present, engaged with, lost in this little machine without it requiring you to have that. So
Right.
that's another term that gets very confused in the field.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Engagement shouldn't be associated directly
yeah,
with that. Yeah.
I think there it's the accessibility of fully immersive technology has allowed it to there to be an explosion in that research. I don't think that that means that less immersive technologies are without value or
Okay.
irrelevant. I think that some things work quite well when they're not fully immersive, and some
Hmm.
things are harder to do. So if you're sitting at a tabletop and you don't have to worry about balance and all these other things, yeah, having a fully immersive environment is quite not accessible, but like easy to implement. But if
Right.
you're trying to run or walk or do something more dynamic and you have this, there's a lot more challenges. And
Yeah.
so I'm not so sure that it's a blanket thing that immersion is going to be
Right.
the answer. I think it's going to vary a lot depending on the task and depending on people's perceptual systems and how well they can
Right.
tolerate it. So it's,
Yeah.
like everything in PT, it depends.
Yeah. 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 Beautiful. I could say more about that. But I love your answer and I'm not going to try to add to it. Thank you very much for clearing that up. You started to actually talk a little bit about the last topic that I wanted to discuss with you here today, the volunteerism, especially at the academy level. We have both have experience. Yours is much, much, much deeper and longer than mine, but especially at the academy level with the Academy of Neurologic Physical Therapy. If you want to speak to others as well, talk to us whatever pulls on your heartstrings there. If you want to talk about the value of giving back, you talked a little bit about the study there of how we can reward people or make it feel engaging for them. What would you like to talk to us about this? And before I turn it over to you, I'm going to hold up a copy of JNPT, and I will tell you the I knew you when story back to you that the spine on this journal, that I'm not going to belabor on the fact is no longer being printed. It is only because of Dr. Judy Deutsch that, and I do remember the very time that you came before the executive committee and said, I would like to put a spine on the journal. So anyway, now with
Yeah.
that said, and you fully flushed with that, talk to me about volunteerism.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do it. It's just so important. And it's important for so many reasons, right? I mean, I
Mhm,
just can't imagine any kind of a life without engaging with and volunteering in some capacity in
mhm.
whatever is meaningful to you.
Yeah,
Um, I tried to volunteer at the well, we were called the neurology section at the time. I
yeah,
really tried to get on that research committee and they would not take me. I don't know why. I tried. And I found a place to volunteer, which was to do a special issue of the journal, and then that led to being the journal editor. And I remember sitting in the room when they announced it and sitting behind Pam Duncan and Andrea Bierman, and Pam Duncan turning to Andrea and going, "Oh yeah, I would never do that job." So, but I really, that was stuff that I like to do. I was extremely lucky that my chair at the time, um, encouraged me to do that, gave me some time aside to do that, supported me to do that. It probably, like, if you were to advise someone on their career, it's not something you do early in your career. It's more like downstream when you're
Yeah,
established. What did I know? But I think, the in joining and connecting with the people in the academy, there's meaning in terms of the kinds of things that you can do to advance whatever it is the goal is that you're trying to advance. But there's also just like the personal connection. I
yeah.
made a lifelong friend with Margaret Schenkman, someone I
Mm,
didn't know, and really admired her work and had actually approached her after a talk, and she had kind of like shunned me. So I was like, but through the academy, she was the secretary. I got to know her. She really is one of my closest friends and colleagues.
yeah,
And I went to India to meditate because of her. So,
yeah,
you just don't know
yeah.
what are all the potential benefits, but obviously there's the meaning of being able to do something,
Right.
not by yourself, but with others that hopefully is useful.
Yeah.
So I can't speak
Collectivism,
about it enough.
purpose, collectivism, the oxytocin effect of actually doing something for something or someone or more than one person beyond yourself. It's yeah, if we had to put a number to it in terms of hours spent volunteering and benefit received, the ROI on it is massive. If you only looked at it from a selfish standpoint of what am I going to get from this? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it
massive.
really is win-win all around,
Yeah,
and then again, and then you just never know
yeah,
what it might turn into or lead or not. But yeah, I mean, it's a very isolating time in the world that we live in, and I think that finding opportunities to connect with others in meaningful ways is ever more important.
yeah. Good. Judy, last few moments together here. Anything, pearls of wisdom, mentorship advice, things you would have done differently? I'm not going to say the trite, if you had a billboard or what advice would you give your 20-year-old self? Take it in any direction that you like. What would you like to leave us with to conclude and wrap up this episode of Tuesdays with Mike?
Um, just don't be afraid.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid to engage in the things that you think you want to do. Um, Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't, but you
Mm,
just have to be in the game. Um,
right.
there's always a way. Sí se puede, siempre se puede, siempre hay
Mm,
manera. There's always a way, right?
yeah,
So I just feel like just go out there and do it.
right.
Um,
Because even when it doesn't work out, you still learn from that, right?
yeah, you just have to
Beautiful.
be in the game. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but generally, like you said, you learn.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You can even win from losses. Excellent. Okay, Judy, thank you so much for your time, your heartfelt energy, both in this hour and the thousands of hours you've given to patients and colleagues and students and academies and sections throughout. And, you and I both know you're not done doing. And so I'm just looking forward to staying connected and finding out what else you're up to and what else you bestow upon us. So thank you very much, my friend.
You're very welcome. And if it's okay to put a plug in, I
Oh,
hope people will consider coming to World Physiotherapy in 2027. It's in Guadalajara, Mexico.
oh,
So for those of us practicing and living in the United States, it's really one of the times where it's not so remote. And so
yeah,
it should be a really accessible from that perspective meeting. So
yeah.
consider coming to the meeting.
What time of year is that in
It's
27?
it's in May.
May. Okay.
It's in May, and the call for focus symposiums is coming out in February. I just worked on it a little bit ago.
Hmm.
If I had been more organized, I would have my little card here to show you and show you the dates. But
And if
I
I
didn't think
had
about
show
it.
notes in a fully polished podcast, I could probably say, "Oh, we'll put it in show notes."
Yeah, I should know the exact date, but I don't. But it's in
Yeah.
May.
That's okay. I may be able to find a way to get a hyperlink on the YouTube description of this episode once it comes out. If you have the capacity to
Oh
get that,
yeah,
that's
I'll be
great.
happy to send that to you. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you,
So
Mike.
you'll be our first actual it's in show notes.
Oh
Very good.
wow.
Yeah. Judy, thanks so much. I'll close up the recording and I appreciate your time very much.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun.